Well, like I usually do, I'd just like to introduce everybody to Patrick Reilly, my old friend. He had a twin brother, Brad Chadford, that passed away not too long ago, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I've known Patrick for a couple of years now, and we've been around the country, not together, but we were in the same place at the same time many times now. I guess we've done 3 or 4 or 5, I guess, different rallies and events, and it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and we have a lot of mutual friends, which is really interesting because I don't know if people know it, but you're not really on my side politically, which is amazing.
Right.
So without further ado,
I really only hang out with you, Dave, for the cool free T-shirts. Like that's really pretty much the only reason that we're hanging out, because I like the T-shirts and stuff. So that's it.
I really get that a lot.
I give away a lot of hats.
Yep.
And that is my ministry stuff. But the main thing is wear it. I'm glad to see you wear it, and we
proud to wear it.
Yeah, appreciate that a lot. I do. So tell me about your twin brother dying. That was really sad. I thought on one of the news feeds somewhere it was real popular. It was trending for a little while, and it was really sad to me.
Well, so the reason I started doing my podcast back in 2018 under a pseudonym, Brad Chadford, was the fact that I worked at a news station in Boston. I've worked in television news most of my adult life, and it just wouldn't have been a good idea to put my name out there and put my employer in a position where they would have to deal with their renegade political idiot saying crazy things. So I just I didn't want to do that. On top of that, I didn't want to expose my family to any kind of reprisal from people, on either side, because I tend to irritate people on both sides of the political spectrum, as you know. But it is important to kind of I decided recently that there's been a shift in the way that we're dealing with politics in this country from an ideological perspective over the last maybe 6 to 8 months, since kind of since the COVID thing started, but mostly I think it has to do with the election cycle ramping up. The COVID thing is something that exacerbates the problem, but people have gone off the rails a bit. And I mean everywhere, on both sides. I'm not trying to put that on the right or on the left. I'm saying it's gotten nutty on both sides. And I just kind of decided that since I no longer have the tether of the working in a local news station, now that I'm an independent contractor, and since that people have gotten so kind of nasty, I just didn't want to hide behind any kind of pseudonym anymore. Not that I ever was that married to it. It was supposed to be a joke. It's a stupid name. Brad Chadford is one of the dumbest names you could possibly come up with, so that's why I did it, right? So, and also I'm a baseball fan, and there was a pitcher called Chad Bradford, and I just flipped it. But in any event, I just think that we've gotten so nutty lately that I wanted to kind of bring a little bit more humanity back to it and just use my actual name. And I think that it's something we should probably discuss, like nationally. We should have a conversation about why we think it's okay to denigrate each other so much over our political beliefs, just because we're ramping up to an election. I don't think it's healthy. I know that you're not a guy who thinks that kind of thing is healthy. And that's why I think we get along well, is because neither one of us are into extremism in any respect at all. And that's what we're experiencing right now. And it's gotten for my taste, it's gotten out of control.
No, I totally agree. And I mean, you're spot on about that, because the way we approach it, the way I look at it, is programming, man. And I think we've all been programmed. No matter which side. I tell everybody, which side you're on, you're still in an echo chamber. You've experienced that better than anybody, because you've crossed over the line and said, hey, I'm going to go play on this side. I'm going to go play on that side. And, that's what I've done for all these years until, 2016, I guess, when, the Covington and Kavanaugh stuff. And I thought, personally, I can't be behind Stop Hate anymore and not be David Sumrall too. And it was a real hard point for me, because it does put you in harm's way. And I am
Yeah.
on the national stage about a lot of stuff. We're involved in a lot of things that
Yep.
can get you in the world of hurt. You've been there, you know. And
I know I'm getting attacked now by the QAnon people, or as my friend Joe Biggs likes to call them, Q-tards.
yeah,
And
that
I've gotten some of the most nasty, vile stuff that you're ever going to hear. I had a guy from New York sent me a Facebook or an Instagram message saying he was going to pull my head off my shoulders if I ever set foot in New York City again. I've had people from all over the country, send me messages threatening me. I had a guy just tell me straight up he was going to kill me. I know that most of these threats are ridiculous, but I have a wife, you know what I mean? Like who,
thank you.
who I would really rather not be assaulted. And some of these threats came from Massachusetts, and, I live in Boston. So, it's this not a joke, you know what I mean? Like, this not funny. I'm all for politically incorrect humor and making fun of people and stuff like that. I do it all the time. And I can take it when it's done to me, but there's a difference when you start threatening people's families.
That's
And
right.
that's happening on both sides. And I got to say, there's as much vitriol on the left as there is on the right. I mean, it's gotten so out of control that I don't even know how to quantify like which is where. I mean, it's not, a threat is a threat. It doesn't matter who it comes from. And
Right.
I think that, you've got the idiots out in Portland. I saw that video today. I'm sure you saw it, and I think the whole world has seen it now, of that poor guy getting kicked in the head, and by those Antifa morons. And that stuff can't be acceptable to anybody, and it can't be acceptable to anybody that the QAnon people are going out and talking about how Tom Hanks is a child molester with no evidence. And this stuff's got to stop. Like, we've got to cut this nonsense out, because if we don't, it's cancer and it's going to kill us. That's just
it is the society cancer and that's the thing. We weren't called to judge, we were called to love, and we forgot
Right.
that a long time ago. And it's not to be cheesy or corny or all that stuff, but
No.
I mean, and I know you. If I just saw your stuff on the internet, I may not like you. But now that I
Right.
know you, then
Yeah.
I care about you because we have that relationship. It's different, and
Right.
people don't want to take the time because they're programmed to judge somebody quickly and move on, and
Yeah.
keep them not.
I think the biggest problem, honestly, Dave, I think the biggest problem is that we've decided that when we disagree with somebody politically, we're going to assign nefarious motives to their beliefs, right? So if you were to say to me, I think we should have voter ID for all elections in the country, I can go one of two ways. I can say, well, that makes you a racist.
Yeah.
Or I could say, well, you want to secure elections in this country in a different way than maybe I would. Okay. Now, the same way it goes the other way too. If you were to say, I think that we should not have any mail-in voting because all of you want voter fraud to be rampant so that you can steal the election. Or you could say, I think you want voter fraud. You want mail-in ballots because you're concerned about public health. So if we constantly assume the worst about each other because of the political differences that we have, we're never going to get anywhere. What I like to do is default to the position that, well, this guy's got an opinion. He honestly holds it. It's not because he's a bad person. I just disagree with him. Let's talk about it. If we could just do that, we could fix almost all of the political problems that we have. But instead of doing that, what I'm doing is I'm assuming you're a racist, and these guys are assuming that I want to steal the election. And we're never going to get anywhere that way.
That's right. And we never talk about things that we do agree about. There's never a healthy conversation. It's always, what do we disagree about?
Right.
And I'm so sick to death of that, man. And here's a great example. I see pictures of your dog all the time.
Everybody does, because I refuse to stop posting them.
Your dog's famous, man. So that's the thing. I mean, and for me, that means a lot because I'm a dog guy, and I lost my dog a couple of months ago. So I
I'm
get
sorry
to
to hear that, man. I
see,
know how tough that is. Yeah.
exactly. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. We all have pets, or we all have family, or we all have jobs, we all have responsibility, headache, children, the whole nine
Uh-huh.
yards. And until we
Yeah.
get back to that, man, we're gonna fall apart, dude. And that's the part that
I know.
scares me.
I
Because
agree
it's
with you 100%.
so here's an example. Don't you agree we need caps on people staying in the Senate for their whole life or in Congress
Oh
for the
my God. Yeah, hey, you don't have to convince me of that, man. Like, it
see
didn't used to be this thing where like the Senate was the last job that you ever have.
ever,
Like, because you
ever,
stay there for 50
unless it was
years.
the Supreme Court or something. But and that's the thing. I don't understand how the
Even the
left
court, though, I would say should have like a 20-year limit. You know what I mean? Like,
at least an age limit of you hit a
yeah.
certain age. Come on, man, and we don't need that anymore.
Right. I understand why the founders didn't want to have a limit on the court, because they didn't want people to be beholden to political, positions, or the fact that they were appointed by a certain president. But the
Yeah,
fact is that we didn't have human beings living to be 90 years old
right,
back in 1776 and 1790 when we ratified the Constitution. So, like, the whole idea that we would, if you would have told Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, all these guys that we would be having Supreme Court justices who are 90 years old, they would have looked at you like you were insane.
our
You
guys
know,
in the Senate for 30, 40 years. I mean, come on,
exactly, because people just didn't live that long. So
good
I
job.
think I totally agree. I'm all for term limits. I really am. Like, I know the argument against it is
Sure,
that we have elections and those are term limits. And if people,
does not
but the
work that
fact that incumbents in this country enjoy such an advantage over people who challenge them because of the money that's in politics,
way.
that
Yes,
I don't think that it's reasonable to think that we should not have term limits. We should have term limits because these guys can get in and just stay in, and it happens in both parties. Nobody's clean in this, and
exactly.
I'm all for it. Joe Turner has Joe Biggs has a really good T-shirt about term limits. I can't remember what it was, but it's a pretty funny T-shirt, and yeah, I'm all for term limits,
Well,
definitely.
if it's something like that we can agree on,
Yeah.
then we need to fight together and just say, look, we're not going to take no for an answer. This is the left and the right working together like the whole country wants to see. Another one is
Yeah.
a pedophilia. Don't you think that a pedophile needs a rock thrown around his neck and toss him overboard?
Yeah, I mean, my issue with all that, like, I think it's got to be the most horrific, horrendous, disgusting crime that you could ever possibly commit. I don't believe in the death. I don't support the death penalty under any circumstances, because I don't want to give the state the power to kill people. I
I
think that
understand
they do it incorrectly most of the time. A lot of times we find out, people were innocent, and when technology gets advanced, and we find out, DNA evidence is exonerated a lot of people who are dead, and we can't bring them back.
horrible
Yeah.
stories about that. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't support the death penalty, but I definitely don't want to ever see somebody who committed a sexual act against a child to ever see the light of day again. I would, permanent, lifetime sentences is fine with me. I wouldn't go as far as the death penalty, but yeah, that stuff enrages me, and we could argue about the death penalty all night long, but I think that Republicans and Democrats, lefties and righties, are revolted by that. Any normal human being is just
Mhm.
disgusted by those kind of crimes.
And another thing we can agree on. So that's what I'm trying to do is find people that
Yeah,
can get past the hey, we don't agree 100% about every
sure.
single thing. Because I mean, you and I have never agreed about everything. I think the first
No.
time we were sitting down talking, and you started firing off questions at me. I was like, dude, I'm not that guy. I'm not. I can't even
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
on half of this stuff. You're way smarter than me, and it's intimidating.
No,
Stop.
no, that's not true. But no, it's just it's funny because, and this is something that I've been I wanted to talk about. I want to talk to a few people about this, because I think it's affecting a lot of people that I know. In 2018 and 2019, when I first started doing like activist events and going to stuff and talking to people, um, I made a lot of friends pretty quickly on, on the right, guys at InfoWars, people like Adriana DiCiaccio. I even hung out with Laura Loomer a little bit. I mean, like I talked to a lot of people, and I think because that was when Trump was kind of in the middle of his term, and the people who were really angry were on the left, right? And people on the right were a little bit confident because they had their man in office and he was doing the things that they wanted him to do or whatever. And now it's gotten to the point where a lot of those same people that I was able to have constructive conversations with, or at least friendly conversations with, aren't doing it anymore. And it's because of the election. We're ramping up to the election and people are angry on both sides in a way that I think is unhealthy. I can just give you an example. I got booked on InfoWars like a month ago, and they decided to cancel it the day of. And the whole thing was like, look, we really don't want to have liberals on the show leading up to the election.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, I didn't ask to get booked. Somebody asked me.
Yeah.
And I'm not throwing people under the bus or whatever, but it was just like, it was disappointing because I'm like, really, we're not going to be able to have these discussions anymore because I think they're productive and they're healthy. And, I'm not saying it should be me necessarily. Like if you want to have me on the show, that's fine. But have a liberal, just somebody,
Well, you've been around forever, like I have, saying let's bring back civil debate. Let's talk about it. Let's get back to the nuts and bolts of what. But hey, you're the master at segues because that brings me right into my next topics. You're talking about InfoWars and all. What about the Millie Weaver story?
Right.
What do you think about InfoWars' latest media stunt, for lack of a better word? You know what I'm saying?
Well, so this is interesting, right? Because I read a lot about this morning, right? Because obviously the story broke, I think it was on Friday.
Right.
And then it became this crazy, storm on social media. And so I read as much as I possibly could. And unfortunately, the indictment that was posted on just about every website in Ohio and everywhere else across the country doesn't detail the actual crime, right? It just details the charges, okay?
Yeah.
So Millie Weaver's mother, who apparently was the one who initiated the complaint, posted on Facebook that, look, this was a family dispute over Millie apparently recording an argument that they were having, and her mother realizing she was recording it, and then or Millie's mother recording it, and Millie stealing her $50, she said $50 cell phone, and then I guess made some threats to her and then left. And somehow this also involves her boyfriend and her younger brother who lives with her or whatever. So this happened apparently in like June, and her mother made a formal complaint with the police and then tried to rescind it, tried to like get them to drop these charges, but the police wouldn't do it. And so they arrested her on Friday in kind of weird circumstances. So she gets someone from Rebel Media in Canada started a GoFundMe page and raised $137,000.
Wow.
For Millie Weaver, which they say they're going to give her now that she got out of jail today. She had to spend the weekend in the clink.
Isn't that the reason on Friday, so they'll stay till Monday? I mean, that's
absolutely. That's the whole reason, so they can collect the bail. I mean, the cops are corrupt that way. I mean, it's always been that's why cash bail is like a horrible thing. But we talk about that another time. The thing about it is, they wanted to make some money off her, and they did. But she's getting 137 large for getting arrested for stealing her mom's cell phone. So I think that's a pretty funny situation. But if you look at it on InfoWars or any of the other right-wing media outlets, they're acting like she got arrested for making the documentary, and I use the term loosely, that she was making, which I haven't seen even the trailer for. I wasn't really.
What? You haven't seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. I didn't watch it because Millie Weaver, look, first of all, I consume a lot of right-wing media, but I do, try not to consume all of it, because Millie Weaver went down to Alabama and was talking about voter fraud in the Roy Moore election with no evidence whatsoever. Like, I'm sorry, Millie Weaver is kind of a BS artist.
That is
Like, so I'm not that interested in what she has to say. I'm not saying I won't watch it eventually, but it just wasn't a priority of mine.
No,
But
I understand.
The whole case I thought was insane. And I'm like, this is one of those things where you had some sort of white trash kind of interaction with your family, and now you're trying to blame the US government like they even know who you are. Like, do you think for 1 second that someone in the United States government knows who Millie Weaver is and is like, we got to stop this lady from putting out silly videos on the internet?
If you had seen her video, if you'd have seen the documentary, you'd understand how. It explains the whole thing.
Okay, so explain to me, Dave, because I'm not familiar, and I want to be, edified here.
Educated here, man, and that's what we're here to do, is educate people. No, I'm just kidding. No, the whole thing is, it just says that there's, if the government wants to do something, it keeps it within the government if the people can know. We all know the government uses contractors for everything else. That's not new knowledge. So then it talks about all the information going to the NSA, and it just says that there's a split, and that all these other contractors and other people can have the same information that the NSA gets through a 72-hour drop, but they can keep it. So, and I get it. It's information, and there's probably some really weird stuff. It tied Roger Stone in, it told Manafort, all these people. So it's interesting.
I'm not going to make a judgment necessarily on
everything.
Whether her information is correct or not. What I am going to make a judgment on is that nobody in the United States government cares what Millie Weaver does on YouTube. I really seriously don't think that's
brilliant. Here's the brilliant thing about the way they did that. So they released the video on YouTube saying, oh, we're going to get this out here. Everybody's going to want to stop it. Now, YouTube, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to take it down, right?
Yeah.
So then Alex says, this is the only place you can watch it is at band.video, whatever.
Oh, yeah. No, it's beautiful.
My thing over here, and now you can see everything, So branding, marketing, dude, I'm telling you, it's brilliant. And I don't think.
Oh, hey, look, man, there is nobody sharper on the right wing as far as marketing than Alex Jones. I mean, there's just nobody. I mean, it's not.
He drove a lot of traffic. He drove a lot of traffic. And like I said, everybody even on our side got it. Some people were mad at him. And I saw, especially this one guy put a tweet out and then he erased it. A real good friend of mine. And I thought that was probably smart to erase that tweet. I did get a screenshot though. So
yeah, right. No, I think, hey, look, man, if you want to talk about, marketing and especially internet marketing and social media marketing, I mean, there's nobody on the right that's sharper than Alex Jones with that stuff. The whole operation is just impeccably run when it comes to that,
really
so I don't question his chops or the organization's chops with doing that. I just think that, like, it does bring up, for me, it brings up the idea of social media MAGA star grifting, right? Yeah. Whereas $137,000.
Dude, we've seen a lot of activism. You and I both have seen a lot of people come through the movement, and they've got a big talk, and they've got super talking points, and they friend everybody real quick. And it's like you said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So, dude, I've done the events. I've put on the events. You remember the Tennessee concert and everything. Dude, I've had people come. They don't remember your name. They don't want to share your brand. They don't want to help. They don't want to contribute. They don't want to be a team. And it breaks my heart, because how can we ever do this on both sides if we can't even do it on our own side? Yeah. And you know my heart, so that, I mean,
absolutely, man.
I wish that I could get you and, a handful of other people just to do our own little media thing and start spreading the truth. I've got Mark Sutherland from the UK. We did that with Kevin Shipp the other day from the CIA. That's really cool. And we can get,
well, I'd love to check that out, because I watched the movie that Kevin Shipp was involved in, Out of Shadows. Yeah. And so I was interested because he's kind of broken with those with that group, afterwards, with Liz Crokin and and
Yeah.
Mike Smith and those guys. And so I'm interested to see exactly how that's going to go, because his story to me is very interesting with his situation with the CIA and basically being kind of like his family being poisoned in that base that they were at, So
I'm so glad you're familiar with that. And listen, I can
yeah.
set up a conversation. We can have both y'all on a podcast and talk real.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I mean, and he wants to do a weekly with Mark and I, so I'm really excited about that as well. So, we're trying to have these conversations. We're trying to, just trying to reach across whatever aisle people have in their mind, whether it's religion or politics or sex or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We're here as one country, and the whole 9/12 phenomenon. We've had our emotional event. We don't need
See,
another.
that was a good idea that Glenn Beck had, as much as I might not like Glenn Beck about but the 9/12 thing, where he was like, the feeling that we had on that day would be, if we could just hold on to that for a while, it would be amazing. We could get a lot done. But it was sort of inevitable that we were going to go back to our ideological corners not long after that.
That's right.
What's funny is that I was in the Navy still at the time. I was still stationed I was on USS Tortuga, and we sort of like, there was a different feeling on the ship the next day, and a different feeling in the whole area in Norfolk. And, but it didn't last that long. You know what I mean? And I wish that we could figure out a way to get back to that. But I also think that, like, if that didn't instill that in us for a long period of time, I don't know what would. It's sad, but I just don't know what would.
Patrick, Reilly, Mark Sutherland. Mark lives in the UK, and he's trying desperately to get over here and join us on this side of the water. But Patrick is a friend of mine, Mark, that I've known for a couple of years. He's an investigative reporter of sorts, I guess, journalist. Is that a proper? Well, I tell you what. Why don't you both, Patrick? You go first and introduce yourself to Mark. I'm interested to make y'all.
Well, I would say I used to be I was a journalist in the Navy, and since I've been out, I am no longer. I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm definitely just a partisan, bullshit artist. But no, I take a position. I don't pretend to be an unbiased journalist at all. I'm a liberal. I'm a political commentator, but I don't claim the mantle of journalist anymore, because I know the difference between what a journalist is and what it isn't. And really, while I was in the service anyway, I was a bit of a propaganda artist. I mean, that's what military journalism is. So that would be that. Yeah.
Right. And Mark, let's tell him who you are and what your experience is.
Well, Patrick, I'm Mark Sutherland. I'm a filmmaker, film producer. I comment on politically quite a lot in America. Very privileged to do that. I played my very small role in us leaving the EU. I made a short film in 2015 where it takes the book of Daniel in the Old Testament in the Bible and has set it amongst the political machinations of Washington politics. And that was my contribution to trying to wake America up in regard to, I'll put my cards on the table, in regard to making sure that Donald Trump won the presidential election at that time. That has made me rather unpopular at times within certain people, along with my views.
That'll happen.
Yeah, along with my views of joining 17,410,752 people, with a majority of over 1 million that voted to leave the EU. And I am absorbed. I care for the nation that you live in very much. I visited America last year, I think 3 times. I can't wait for international flight to happen again. But I care very deeply, and I watch what is happening in your country very much.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, Dave, if you don't mind if I ask some questions, but what do you think about the whole Irish backstop situation with Brexit, like how is that actually going to function?
That's very interesting because, as some people think, oh, we're going to build a brick wall along the Irish Sea.
Sure.
The whole Irish backstop is very, very interesting because we have to turn back and see that Tony Blair, when he became our prime minister in 1997 and left, I think in 205 or 207 or 205. You know, he persuaded the Irish government to take on the euro and all this kind of thing. How's it going to work? Well, the thing is, as you know, politically between the South and the North, because of the IRA and all the rest, and in many ways, fundamentally, Sinn Féin, etc., would like to see a united Ireland between North and the South. That whole issue has come up again. But the fact is that there is the technology to allow lorries and goods to cross from Northern Ireland to Southern Ireland and Southern Ireland to Northern Ireland without having any checks. You know, in other words, without having to put a border up. But
I think if you said that to most American Trump supporters, they would tell you that there is no such thing as a border that doesn't have a physical wall.
Touche, Patrick. And then I would turn around. And say to you that the reason why that there may be a wall on the Mexican border is the whole thing of illegal immigration, and that is quite an interesting issue in regard to Southern Ireland, because it's not publicized in the regard to suddenly an influx of a particular faith of Islam into Southern Ireland. That is not discussed at all, and that has some quite serious consequences. But going back to what you were saying about goods, the issue is in regard to boats and stuff like that. How that is going to work out, I am not quite sure, but it would mean that if they are sailing into Southern Ireland, that's one thing. But then having to take those goods into Northern Ireland, then as they go into Northern Ireland ports, you would have to then pay duty on that, and then you would have to, then they would have to be checked. And all the duties of bringing those goods in, that has then got to be put in the cost price from the distribution point of whatever country is going on. We've faced it. It's slightly different, but you're raising a really important issue, because today Barnier and the European Union have then thrown at us to say that our banks and our financial services will not be able to have the easy access to the European market that we have got at the moment, and that we would have to negotiate a deal with every single country that is part of the union. So that's negotiating with 25, 26 other countries.
Right, which would seem to me that you would want to do a thing like that prior to actually making a final decision about Brexit. I mean, I don't know if that, logistically is possible, but it seems a bit ass backwards to go ahead and leave and then figure it out after the fact. And well, I would just suggest also, not to get into semantics, but there is no such thing as Southern Ireland. There's the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're not playing semantics. You're quite rightly correcting me, because there may be a heritage that you have with that country. I don't know. Yeah, of course. So the fact is it is the Republic of Ireland, but it is also Southern Ireland, because you've got Northern Ireland and then you've got Southern Ireland, and even the locals would actually refer to that. And I am not playing semantics. But the other thing is, in regard to leaving Brexit, the whole thing that under an agreement, the Lisbon Agreement of 2010-ish, suddenly there was put in regard to that, which is actually the European Constitution. They actually then, if you then managed to get a vote, you could put a vote in, and then you would put in a letter to say that you would be leaving in 2 years' time. And then what would happen is that in that leaving of 2 years' time, you would then negotiate how you were going to leave. And the reason why we've got to this point is because Mrs. Theresa May, in my opinion, deliberately her then chief leader of the civil service in regard to the negotiations, then basically completely and utterly cocked it up, and we're turning round. Our main civil service negotiator, and it come to me, Ollie Robbins, a man that has written a number of essays when he was at university, just espousing the delights of Stalin. So we can come to that on another time. But the fact is that they mucked up the whole of the negotiations for 2 years. That's what they did.
Yeah.
You know, that's what.
Well, to me, it just seemed like, say I don't care about whether they leave or don't, because frankly, I don't. But, and it's none of my business. I think, the UK is a sovereign. They can do what they want. But it seemed like a shoot, ready, aim sort of proposition, right? Like you're not really sure how you're going to make this happen, but you're gonna start the timer, and you better get it done when the clock strikes midnight. But you didn't get it done. You know what I mean? So like this has been a debacle of epic proportions, and it seems like it's a self-inflicted wound. And I mean, as an American, I don't need to understand, the machinations of British politics to kind of just from afar say, this looks like a complete Charlie Foxtrot. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's very interesting you say that. And I'm very glad that you've said that. And then I would turn around and say, actually, no, it's not. But I'm not surprised that you've said that, because we then spent 4 years fighting our own parliament, fighting the people that we had actually voted for, that were supposed to be representing us, which,
right.
etc. And we spent 4 years fighting them. And then we were, in many ways, we were never supposed to leave. Once you joined, it's a bit like California.
So
no one is actually going to leave. But if the government had actually done, if the parliament had done what they said for 4 years, and that's why then eventually the Boris Johnson on the 12th of December last year managed to get it over the line, which was to turn around and go, right, we're going to have an election. He then had an 80-seat majority, and then officially on the 30th, he said, we've got to deliver this. The people of this country, the majority, you are a representative republic that uses democracy to vote. We are a democracy, which means that and you have all the checks and balances, even if people abuse those checks and balances. But we have 51. We have a democracy where 51% of the vote means that they're then ruling over the other 49%. And the fact is that when we got kicked out, when we went in there, we lost our democracy, and that's it. Period. In 1973.
And it sounds a lot like we have some of the same issues on both sides of the pond. I mean, our politicians don't work for us. Your politicians don't work for you. So we're all in the same boat. I mean, are as many politicians on your side as crooked as the ones on both sides of our political party? In other words, I mean, Patrick will agree.
I would say yes, David, and I would say to you that the whole European Union debate has shown that. But do you know what? You have to dig deeply to find that. So, for argument's sake, the new leader of the opposition party, Keir Starmer, they then were having secret meetings with member of the European Union. We then had the previous Speaker of the House, Bercow, having private negotiations with members of the European Union.
And we hear
all of this.
We hear about politicians going over to China, politicians going to Russia, doing all kinds of things. They're not the Secretary of State or anything, but they're going to go talk to. So, I mean, the corruption's real. We're dealing with that on every level, both sides of our party, of parties, and both sides of the pond. I mean, so what I'm trying to get at, and I know it's funny because the whole conspiracy theory stuff, but I mean, this is global. This is not just people talking about, well, there's a little corruption here and we really need to fix some little problems here and there. This is like a global deal. It's probably the most important thing in our lifetime is necessity of time that we address some of these issues. Now we talk about resets, we talk about awakenings, we talk about, revival, we talk about all these things, but I mean, if it doesn't come down to us getting back together, we're going to fight. We're going to see a war. There's going to be a lot of bloodshed. The people that cause it will not be blamed. That's the way that works. And we're trying to help avoid that. And, I think your perspective from Britain looking in, and I think my perspective as a conservative, and Patrick is, a liberal, whatever. I mean, this is stuff we can talk about and figure out, how to address these issues together, because I see all these specialties, all these people that have their own little gift of how they speak or what they talk about, and they don't work together. Nobody works together on issues, left or right for sure, but among our own party for another. And that's frustrating to me, to know that the thing that we lack is organization and leadership. Every time it comes back to that.
Well, I think a lot of that, Dave, has to do with the fact that there's a cottage industry, on both sides in American politics, where you can make a lot of money off division. You can make a lot of money off of stoking this nonsense. And this is something that maybe 10 years ago probably didn't exist, but now because of social media, you can actually monetize idiocy, right? So like, you're able to do this. Like, you go out and you sell t-shirts that say "Stop Hate." And I think that's a cool thing. And I love my "Stop Hate" t-shirt. But what some of these guys are selling are completely idiotic, uninformed, jackass ideas.
That's right.
And making a whole lot of money off it, which is, exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like her or don't, someone got arrested for stealing her mother's cell phone and got $137,000, put in a GoFundMe account for it. And this is something that should signal the end of decent society. And maybe it is actually doing that. And it's driving me nuts,
All I know is I must be doing it wrong then, because I don't make a dime. Listen, let me finish. You even said yourself, I gave you that t-shirt. So there's the proof.
Yes, I know.
Nobody
so
wants
so you're referring to the Millie Weaver case.
Yes,
so you're referring to the fact that maybe her mother took pictures of papers that were in her house that she shouldn't have done. I don't know.
No, it's different. It's different, Mark. What they're saying is that her and her mother had an argument, and that it was her mother's phone, and Millie might have taken it, and it might have had the fight on it, and her mom didn't want to take it, so she filed charges and then tried to pull them back, but the police said, no, we're going to go ahead and go follow through.
Of course Millie's mother made a Facebook post that explained the whole thing from her perspective, and basically she was like, I got mad at her, but then I tried to take it back, but the police wouldn't do it, and they arrested her. But my point is that she got $137,000 from GoFundMe from Rebel Media.
I need that help.
I mean, you can't even make this nonsense up.
Can you imagine how good Stop Hate would do with $137,000?
We need it. We need it.
You know how many rallies and concerts we could put on?
Oh, yeah. Man. Hey, man, I got some student loans I'd like to pay back, I mean, damn, like $137,000. That's crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. That was one of those things where I laughed at it to a certain extent, but then, I sat down, I was talking to my wife about it, and we were like, man, this is really if this isn't a sign of the apocalypse, I don't know what would be. Why
is that, Patrick? Have you watched her documentary?
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with Millie Weaver. Very familiar. Yeah. I know that she went down to Alabama on a ridiculous Roy Moore's election was stolen from him nonsense hoax, and then she did the same thing with I think it was I forget the name of the governor of Kentucky. I think it was Matt Bevin. I'm sorry, I do remember his name. With this reflexive, anytime a Republican loses an election, it must have been voter fraud thing. And I just think that she's a bit of a BS artist. That's my personal opinion. But I'm not making a judgment on what should go on with this criminal thing. I tend to think it's all nonsense. If her mother wants to drop the charges, they should just let her go. But the fact that they were able to raise $137,000 for somebody who stole a $50 cell phone is just dumbfounding to me.
Actually, it's bigger than that on a personal level. It's it's bigger than that. Yeah, it is marketing gold, David, but it's bigger than that. It's about what is in that documentary and what it actually says, and actually that is what it's actually about to me.
But it's also playing the system, Mark. You've got to understand the way that the media works, the way that America is commercialized, the way we like to be entertained, the way we have to be sensationalized. Because, dude, I'm telling you right now, this was all to drive traffic to InfoWars website.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, nobody in the U.S. government knows or gives a damn about Millie Weaver. Nobody. Absolutely nobody. And definitely nobody in the local Ohio Police Department that arrested her has any idea or cares what Millie Weaver does on YouTube. They just don't. And to think that they do is to have this inflated idea. Her mission is, what her job is, what InfoWars is, what any political media is. It's just sheer ego to think that people in the U.S. government are trying to stop her from putting out a video that absolutely nobody gives a damn about in the first place.
But and you're more than entitled to your opinion. It's fantastic that we're actually having this discussion. Why don't you think people give a damn about the documentary?
I would say, first of all, go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
He hadn't seen it, Mark. He hadn't seen it yet. So, I mean, he really don't know what's
in it. I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen what's in it? Right.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
But I have seen a lot of Millie's work. And the reason that I am going to watch it, and I'm not going to dismiss it completely, but I can't help but go into it knowing who Millie Weaver is and knowing that she has perpetrated a whole bunch of ridiculous hoaxes about voter fraud that are just silly, and that she is a hardcore partisan. I don't think that I would expect someone on the right to go ahead and look at a documentary done by the Young Turks and assume that it was legit until proven illegitimate, right? I wouldn't expect you guys to do that. So please forgive me for not expecting that Millie Weaver's documentary is probably bullshit. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, Patrick, you're more than entitled to your opinion. I'll just say, go and watch this particular documentary.
I sure will.
Because I will say this from a UK point of view. Last October in California, I gave a speech at a luncheon when I called out. I talked about the fact that our government had been involved with spying on the Trump campaign. And people go, what do you mean? Well, I'll just say what I mean. So Dan Bongino's Spygate raised the fact that Hannigan, who was then running GCHQ, and Brennan, who was then running the CIA, then met at directorial level and were most probably passing information. So it might have been, so the Christopher Steele dossier goes from one person to another, sure. Where, of course, the DNC had paid the Russians blah to come up with whatever. Now, I then wrote to my local member of parliament. So in our parliament, we have, say, 640 members of parliament. So I wrote to my member of parliament and I said, will Theresa May, when Donald Trump is over with the state visit, will our prime minister be apologizing to the president of the United States for using GCHQ and our spy agencies for spying on the Trump campaign? I got a very interesting letter back from the Foreign Office that said, of course, GCHQ doesn't comment about any particular involvement that they've had of those kind of activities. And I started laughing. And then they said, but actually, in April 2017, they actually gave a press release and to say that the comments by Judge Neapolitano are true, blah. Well, what was very, very interesting about Millie Wheeler's documentary is that is the fact that it then talks about people like Hannigan, who had resigned from GCHQ, who said he'd resigned for family reasons. As it turned out last year, the reasons why he actually resigned is because he gave a reference to a Catholic priest, which was a friend of the family's. And sadly, this priest was then accused of paedophilia and I think arrested for that. So he then resigned, and that was all covered up. But the fact that there is a link. And then he goes on to work, I think, for a private company called Blue Voyant, who are involved in data collection and all the rest. And that is what this documentary is about. And the reason why it's very, very important, and the reason why it is called Shadow, is because of the fact, or your government, one of your government agencies, the NSA, is turning around and saying, well, we collect all this data and then we're supposed to destroy it. We destroy it in 72 hours. So every time a politician on either side then would go up before a congressional committee and says, well, no, we don't know what's done this. And yes, we're all following the proper procedures. Well, they may say that, but when you then put private contractors in as another gate, so the information is then doubled and it goes into all these private contractors. And what's fascinating to me is that Hannigan then goes and works with a company called Blue Voyant. And I may be wrong, and I then need to check this again. I'll just say that one of the people that Millie then mentions in her documentary, one of the companies is a company called Crowdsource. Well, Blue Voyant is then linked with Crowdsource as a partner operation.
Right.
And basically what is going on, in my opinion, is one of the biggest they are nearly there and creating this spy grid and basically creating a social system that the Chinese have in regard to, if you behave well, then we give you this credit, then you can fly out the country, then you can get on a train. And that is what they are creating. I think Google called it Project Dragonfly.
Yeah.
That is what they are actually doing. But the key thing is this, is when they then say to you and American people, oh, we're not spying on there. When Snowden came out and said what he did, he was bang on the money. So this documentary with two people who are insiders are talking about this. Whatever your political persuasion is, the fact that Brennan comes forward and uses his position to defend Hillary Rodham Clinton for having at least 35,000 emails outside.
Well, you don't have to convince me that that's
separate stuff. I know. And but this is the key thing. This is what this is about. So in many ways, it's non-partisan. But here's the big punch here. And now David got this right. So when Torres is in there, one of the people on the inside who then has her own radio program, and Millie said to her, "So Torres, how many people are involved? Are there more Democrats involved in this than Republicans?" And before Torres could answer on the documentary, I know David shouted out, according to his wife, shouted out, it's Stevens, both sides. And this woman turned around and said, exactly, it's even Stevens on both sides. So they are two wings of the same bird. So that's my observation from the outside. And we have the same thing over here. And without wanting to bore you, when, you know, all the political parties within our Westminster Parliament go, we really think it'd be a good idea if you stay in the EU. We really don't think you should leave. We really don't think you should leave. Then I came to the conclusion that I was living in a communist state, because there's no difference between any of the political parties. And that is why this is very important. And that's why I care very deeply to what is going on, because none of the parties are actually working on behalf of the American people then.
Well, I think you make a good point in that you brought up Brennan and his dishonesty as far as surveillance goes. He was caught dead to rights surveilling Congress, you know, back in 2015, and you know, a lot of people don't pay much attention to that because he got nothing but a slap. Not even you couldn't even call it a slap on the wrist. It was just sort of somewhat acknowledged, like, oh, mistakes were made, which is my favorite way for people to you know, just weasel out of admitting that they did something that they knew was illegal at the time. The thing that this is an interesting topic that for me, especially you know, lately with the Durham investigation that's going on. We talk about what people are calling Spygate a lot, and what I've never been able to understand, and maybe you've done a little more research into this topic and you can enlighten me on this, but Carter Page is the only person that we know had a FISA warrant.
Yes.
You know, against him, right? So, and he also had one in 2013, and then again in 2016. The 2016 FISA warrant was, as far as I'm aware, was renewed 3 times after the original. So it was 4
Yes.
total, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So his warrant was originally authorized by the FISA court on, I believe it was October 25th, somewhere thereabouts, of 2016, which was a month after he had been canned from the Trump campaign. Also, when the Trump campaign was first aware that he was the subject of some sort of, surveillance, they said, well, he was never really involved in anything. He never had a meeting with the president or with the then candidate Trump. So what I want to know is exactly why would, if it was Barack Obama's administration's great plan to surveil and spy on the Trump campaign, why in God's name would they surveil someone who didn't work there anymore, and when he did work there, had absolutely no contact with the principal at all?
That's a very good point. And some of that I can't answer. Again, there was this whole thing of a file that they then accused him of having, and all this. And we also know that when various people went to the FISA court, they didn't make all the facts open.
Oh, it was dirty for sure.
To the people there.
Yeah.
And I think this goes back to, and Millie does this in the documentary. I'm referring to this because something I quite rightly learned about a lot. It goes back to 2008, where General Jim Jones thought he was going to get Hillary's job, basically, and then he was given another job. And then eventually he becomes a private contractor in regard to gathering all of this information. It's the fact that all of this was going on without the American people's knowledge, and they're told one thing, but it's not actually happening. Now, I agree. I understand the point you're making. I can't fully answer that. But the key thing is we cannot deny that there is all of this spying. And it goes back to the fact that various people thought they're going to now use the 25th Amendment to take the president out. To take the fact.
Do you really think that was ever a serious thing? I mean, obviously they didn't do it.
I hear you. But the fact is look, the resentment of people like McCabe, Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Rice, and then Condoleezza Rice, not Condoleezza Rice, the other Rice, Susan Rice, the whole thing of this, I would call them this cabal, right? When we go back to the fact, I think in 2007, HSBC is prosecuted for the fact that there they are in regard to Mexican drug cartels and making sure that the tellers' windows are of a certain height so that certain crates of money could go in. Then HSBC is then revealed as one of the biggest, money laundering operations in the world. And of course, Comey was a director at some point of HSBC. Mueller then resigns. Comey his job. As well, I'm not walking away from the point. There is a point to this. All this whole thing of the revolving doors and the revolving doors and the revolving doors, and it's all the same characters, and they all seem to get promoted and get nice, comfortable jobs. And you guys,
of course they do. How in the name of Christ do you have the National Security Advisor at the time of 9/11 gets promoted to Secretary of State within a year? How does that happen? Like, this is not new, man. This has been going. I know you know this, and I'm not trying.
No, not at all. I mean, you see, because you absolutely right. And then, of course, with 9/11, there's the Patriot Act ready to go. There is project of the New American Century, and on page 55, it's turning around and saying we need that America needs a new Pearl Harbor. And we can get, I don't necessarily want to get into the conspiracy of all of that, but I'm definitely on that side. And sadly, and the fact that, you then have the Department of Homeland Security and what that means. But going back to what you say about...
Which should not exist in the first place. Yeah.
Precisely. And the fact is that going back to what I was saying about the 25th Amendment, and you raise a very good point, I personally don't think that you could count that off the table, because look at the, you know, the Struck, McCabe, all this whole thing, the hatred, to me, the hatred of this outsider who came from outside to then challenge the establishment. And just because he's not some polished speaker like Barack Hussein Obama, who was given a Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing, who
And
then
he knows that too. He was embarrassed by what they gave him.
well, I don't
He
know. I mean, I hear you. I have to take that on face value. I mean, I don't necessarily think he was embarrassed. I mean, the fact that we have to remember that this man's political career started on a sofa around Bill Ayers' house. Bill Ayers' house. I mean, we have to. I say it respectfully. We have to remember this, you know. And it's not a. I mean, I care. I am absorbed by your politics, Patrick, and I care very, very much for your country, because the key is this: whatever people think, right? In Barack Hussein Obama turned round to us before we voted to leave the EU, turned around and said, well, if you leave the EU, vote to leave, you will go to the back of the queue. Well, I'm very grateful he said that, because then 17,410,752 people were spurred on more to vote out. And that he said that in a private comment in number 10, and Cameron then asked him to say it privately. And the thing is, there is a long history that is not conspiratorial, because I believe that the EU is a leg of global governance. But it's when you start, like now, Patrick, this is a fantastic conversation, and I am loving this conversation, because you are making me think, because all we're trying to do is meet each other with facts and facts and facts and facts,
Sure.
and not meet it from an emotional point of view.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And
Well,
I am
not trying to convince each other, shove our thoughts down each other. You know, this is the way it is. If you don't accept it, then you're just wrong. That's not the point of this whole exercise to me. It's
right. Well, I mean, I think you have to approach every argument, whether it's a political argument or otherwise, understanding the fact that you may be completely wrong. You know, like if you don't do that, then you're never going to get anywhere with anything. You know, I have to accept the idea, not just the idea, but the certainty that I may have my head way up my ass about this. You know what I mean? And that's the way it has to be. And if you don't do that, you're not gonna have a productive discussion with anybody about anything.
And it takes courage, and seriously, and I'm not blowing blue smoke up your backside, as you say, on your side of the pond. The fact is that it takes courage to admit that. It does take courage to admit that. It takes courage to say, well, I could then be wrong. And that's why then we go and do the research, and we go down the rabbit hole, and we try and work this out, and we try and get the facts of what's going on. And you're quite right when you talk. You've said this about Brennan, and we've said this about other people, to me, who have abused their power. If we talked about Benghazi, and we went through all the history of that, which has taken so long to get out there, right? And is on the one hand, it's complex, but sadly, you know, brave Americans have died. Then it involves, you know, taking down a SEAL Team 6 and all that, and helicopters, and Biden opening his gob and revealing people that he shouldn't do, and all of this kind of thing. And we then go down this other rabbit hole where it reveals all of this. And it is really important that we can have these debates, and, as I say, just bring evidence, because our countries are joined. Because whatever anyone thinks, the President of the United States is always viewed as leader of the free world, which I would now put in inverted commas with what they're trying to do with this COVID-19 scam, and which is how it's affecting my country, your country, Australia, Canada, rather interesting, and other countries around the world, and trying to bring in, to me, global tyranny and control. And they seem to be doing a very, very good effort. We have been conned in this country in regard to all of this, and I can easily go through that, you know, and it's an appalling situation. at the moment?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, we've both been conned. I mean, every side of everything. You know, like we talked about starting. We talk about the '90s, but we know it's the '80s and the '70s and the '60s and 1905 and 1844. I mean, we know that this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
like a longer game, and we're just playing in it, and we really don't understand what's going on. And yeah, we don't understand politics, whatever, but we're trying really hard because it's affecting our day to day lives, and that's why I appreciate the chance to have friends like you guys. That I mean, seriously, I don't want to sit and talk to people that think and talk just like me all day long. There's no fun in that for me.
Oh,
So
absolutely. That's why I've never
I
had a
enjoy
liberal
trying
on
to
my
learn from you
show.
guys.
Like I've never
Is
had a
that
liberal
right?
guest.
Right. I look forward to being on your show then, Patrick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I've never actually done it because I don't see any point in me, talking to somebody who I'm going to agree with the whole time. I'd rather, talk to somebody who I'm going to disagree with, more often than not.
What journalism were you then doing, Patrick? What were you doing?
I joined the Navy in 1999 as a military journalist, and I went to school at Fort Meade, the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, Maryland, and I spent 2 years on the USS Tortuga as the command journalist, where I did all the photography and press releases, things of that nature for the ship. And then I worked at AFN Sigonella, which is the hat that I have on now, which is
Oh,
a
right.
20-year-old.
Okay.
I worked at the American Forces Network in Sigonella, Sicily, which is outside Catania for 2 years, and then I got out and went to film school and worked in local television news in Boston for most of the last 20 years. So
Wow. So you're in Boston now? Is that where
yeah, I'm in Boston now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So who was the alter ego that you were?
Oh, well, I mean, it's not, I haven't changed. It was just the name. I haven't changed anything about what I'm doing. It was just the name. So yeah, it was just the Brad Chadford thing was just.
He just said that now that Brad Chadford is gone, he's not going to sugarcoat it anymore. He's just going to tell it.
Well, I wasn't sugarcoating anything before, but I think I'm just going to use my regular name. You know what's funny?
That's true.
I was
that's probably that's a fair point.
Yeah, you know what I wanted to ask you guys about activism to see if maybe I want to float a proposition and see what you think of this, right? So in the last 2 years, I've done, as Dave knows, a whole lot of events. We've been at a bunch of events together and all that. I think that it's gotten to the point now where people have decided to stop paying attention to whatever anybody says on the other side because the election is getting closer and closer. And so rather than the kind of more calm, nature of 2018, we're in this situation where we can't get together. We can't figure out how to talk to each other anymore. And it's a lot of it's exacerbated by the fact that you can make money doing this now, whereas that didn't used to be a thing. And it is now. And I'm not sure if there's any way forward with this, like if there's anything that's going to come of conversations other than like what we're having right now, which I think is incredibly productive and really cool. But this is not normal. Like this is just not happening. You know what I mean? And people on both sides are getting more and more extreme. And the reason I think it's happening is because take an organization like InfoWars, right? Just for example, you go into the studio and everybody who works there is of one mind, right? There is one political opinion in that place. There are no closet Democrats in there. There are no liberals. It's fine. They have this echo chamber that they live in. And then they go, when they do interact with people on the other side, it's at events, rallies where the other side, their crazy people are out, right? So the lefty Antifa nuts are out there, right? So they're either only dealing with themselves, hardcore right-wingers, or the nutcases on the left. And so they don't really have an actual picture of what the country is like. You create an artificial picture of what the nation is really like. And you think everybody's either on the hard right or the hard left. And you can get a really distorted idea about reality. And that's not
right.
helping anybody, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, you're
I
exactly
think,
right. And that's what it's the
Go,
othering,
David.
it's the
Go, David.
tribe
Mm.
groups, it's the how different are you than me, and why, what can we fight about? You know,
Yeah.
and I don't know, man. I've done this for years and years, and I've seen just about everything, I guess. And it's really the same old stuff, man. And it really comes down to the people that want to have the conversations, care, because they haven't drank the Kool-Aid on either side as much. You know, I can't say anybody's Kool-Aid free at this point, but
No,
you know, there are people that are seeing, like you and me and Mark, you know, that see what's going on, man. And it's just sad. And I know that, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not even a red and blue thing anymore. It's an American thing. We got to get back to, you know, all that cheesy stuff, like liking each other and stuff like that. But it's got to happen initially. And I don't want another
I
Civil
think,
War or
Patrick,
9/11.
no, I mean, the last thing I want to see is any violence. I really do. And then I think you're raising an incredibly important and profound question. In other words, right now we are modeling something that I think is very, very important. And I would say to you that if I had the privilege of being in the same room as you, which I'd hope I would one day, which is we are there, there's David there, there's someone else, and we are then having a discussion. And say, for argument's sake, that discussion was then taken to a university, right? And it's how we are then modeling. So me in my late 50s talking to some students who are 18 to 22, and we are modeling the fact that you and I, we might have a lot of different opinions, but the fact that we can respect those different opinions and again come together with facts and explain why we believe in this passionately, and then to get through all the distortion. That's the key thing. So in other words, when I'm watching Dinesh D'Souza debate Bill Ayres at a university, right?
Yeah.
And I've deliberately picked them because to some it would seem, you know, extremes on both sides. Well, I know quite a bit about Bill Ayres and the Weather Underground, and I don't really have much time for him. How he ended up being a university lecturer, I'm just astounded. But that's just personal opinion. But the fact
I would
is,
agree with you on that.
but the fact is that, thank you. The fact is that it's a debate, and people are able to have that debate, and it is about listening and hearing each other. And what is fascinating, what is fantastic with our conversation, and I think David would say this because he said this on many other occasions, is that I turn around and go, well, hold on a minute. We then walk away and work out that we do agree on quite a lot, maybe agree on things that we didn't actually, in many ways, on the one level, expect. So I turn around and say, you had a fight with us in 1776. You for particular reasons, you know, no taxation without representation. The big thing. That's one of the reasons why we left the EU as well. So there's the similarities. The fact that up until 1787 in September is when your constitution is written, and you know, to some it's not going to be this incredible perfect bit of paper, but for crying out loud, it's modeled on the Magna Carta. It's modeled on our constitution of 1688, 1689, and common law and all the rest. And you had these people that had actually, you know, for various people, I think like Benjamin Franklin, I think comes to mind, where they had fortunes, but they lost a lot. It cost them a lot to bring about the United States of America and to bring about the 13 colonies then. It cost, and of course, it was only 3% of the people that fought in the war, with 4% of logistical backup and all this kind of thing. And as I've said, honestly, it's not surprising that you whipped our ass, because any army that's going to march through a forest with red jackets deserves to get his ass kicked. And we did, because you had adopted, you understood guerrilla warfare and all the rest. And that is when you began to work out and think, we can beat this army.
Well, I think the reason that we won was we figured out spying before everybody else did.
Precisely.
And I think, I don't know if you guys have seen the Netflix series Turn, but it's one of the greatest television series I've ever seen. It's all about Washington spies during the revolution. And it's interesting. I mean, look, one of the things that you bring up the Constitution and the point it was written and ratified and all that. One of the things that drives me kind of crazy is when people believe that it's this immaculate document that could never be changed and never be. I mean, obviously we've amended it 27 times, but the founders, the people who ratified that, nobody was happy with it. Absolutely nobody was happy with it. Everybody hated something about it. You know what I mean? So like this whole idea that the Constitution was presented by Jesus to Moses in East Texas during Genesis.
Is that true? I hadn't heard that. And what a blessing!
No, I'm just saying.
I've been-
Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic about this.
I
but,
know you are. I know you are.
So it's it kind of drives me up the walls like when we hear things like that. But no, I your point is well taken though. I understand what you're saying, and I think that one of the things that is kind of unfortunate is that people on I'm going to give a little criticism of the right here, but people on the right who have decided that they are they're custodians of patriotism and the only people that can be patriotic in this country. And if you're a liberal, then you must hate America. Should pound sand, but I think it does a disservice to everybody, just as much as it does a disservice to the country to say that everybody who's on the right is a racist, xenophobe. And so I think we need to grow up a little bit and learn to stop just throwing, hurling insults at each other
on that point, man. And on that point, dude, like I said, I had been, around the country and back with you before, man. And I saw the one, I was not with you, but I saw you breaking up a fight one time, man, and trying to keep people from letting the situation escalate. And not just anybody does that. That's a patriot that cares. I want to, let everybody know. I mean, there's people on both sides that love this country and love each other.
Absolutely.
And we're a lot of us are just sick of the whole politics thing because
even idiots sometimes love the country.
I've never been a political kind of guy.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's okay though. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like people who are have what we would consider maybe stupid political positions. That doesn't necessarily mean that they want to tear down the country. Yeah. And I think we need to stop with that. And it happens both sides. You got these guys out in Portland. I saw that like we talked about earlier, Dave. That poor guy get kicked in the head by those Antifa morons.
Yeah.
And by Antifa, like violent criminals, so you can't call them anything but that, right? And then you've got people on television who are going to say that if you don't agree with Donald Trump, that you hate the country. We gotta cut that shit out, man. Like, I mean, it has to stop. It's got to stop immediately, and it has to stop on both sides. And I'm not looking to exact, political or say that one side is more at fault than the other. I think we should there has to be a moratorium on this stuff. It has to happen soon, and it has to be sincere, or else when we have this election, nobody is going to accept the results if they don't like them. And that is the biggest disaster we could possibly have.
Absolutely. And that's why you have an electoral college for a reason. And you have that electoral college for a reason. So that California, New York, or Washington, D.C. can't ignore the rest of the country and just keep pricking the president of the United States.
You know what? I do have a problem with the electoral college, though, and I'll explain why if you don't mind.
No, don't.
Okay.
Don't.
So first of all, I think the people vote and land doesn't. So that would be my first reason why I dislike it. But if you think about it, the electoral college system basically encourages candidates not to campaign in certain places, right? Now, what I mean by that is that if you think about it, 130,000 people in the city of Chicago in 2016 voted for Donald Trump, right? Now, Donald Trump would never campaign in the city of Chicago. He would never set foot in Illinois really at all, right? Why shouldn't he? Why should the people in Illinois who may vote for him, who may be prone to vote for him, not get to see the president, not get to see somebody come and campaign and ask for their votes, right? You think that that's an antiquated system of silliness that was, agreed upon by a really unfortunate compromise back in
But
1787.
then again, you're not a democracy. You're a representative republic who uses
Based on
democratic
democracy.
means.
Okay.
No, but I'm not playing games. I'm not being semantic. Patrick, I'm just being rude. But the
But
fact
these are
is
still
that
going to make
you use the democratic means by allowing everyone to vote. I think you make a very, very good point, because also Donald Trump got a lot of votes in California. You make a very, very good point. I mean, I could spin it in a different way, where the Barack Hussein Obama goes, I'm from Chicago, and then has the rally of winning, and then doesn't go back there to address any of the issues or even have a speech until he actually finally left 8 years later. So we spin it again. In other words, what you're saying is, what you are discussing, and I think your electoral college is important. It's about encouraging people to have the courage to go to these places. I agree with you. I think there is no doubt about it in the past, and I can't think why now. I'm sure that Donald Trump would have visited Chicago as Donald Trump. There is no doubt about that. And maybe we could go and research that and find out how many times he'd actually been there. You are right. I think you raised a very, very good point. I would love to have seen him maybe, more doing this, more doing that. He's missing certain rallies he's doing. I can say now there'll be a lot more people in Chicago, I believe, that will be voting for him now. There's a lot more people.
That's my entire argument. My whole argument is that people, if it was just a national popular vote, he would have every incentive to go to everywhere he thought he could